What if the very thing your children feared most, the darkness, was the only thing you couldn't protect them from? Picture this: a millionaire father haunted not by ghosts, but by the anguished cries of his 5-year-old twins, who refused to sleep, convinced that every night might steal them away, just like it stole their mother. For months he tried everything: doctors, therapists, even ghost hunters, but nothing could chase away the shadows that had gripped his family. Just when hope seemed lost, an unexpected stranger with a mysterious past walked through their door and changed everything, not with science or money, but with stories, kindness, and a kind of magic you can't buy. But what secrets was she hiding, and would her gentle touch heal their broken hearts or unravel the fragile piece forever? Stay with us, because this story will make you believe in the impossible power of love and the courage it takes to find light in the darkest places. The stately colonial mansion of Wellesley Hills was eerily quiet, yet the silence never brought peace. It was 3 in the morning, and Patrick Hayes moved through his own home like a ghost, eyes bloodshot, shoulders stooped beneath the weight of a grief that never softened. Outside, moonlight shimmered on the blue-tiled pool and pristine gardens. To anyone passing by, it looked like the perfect life, but inside, everything was shattered. Patrick hadn't slept more than a few hours in months. Ever since Allison, his wife, the heart of their family, had passed away in her sleep, something in the house had changed. It was as if the very air turned cold every night, holding its breath for the next scream. The cries always came at 3:15 a.m., sharp, echoing down the hallways with terrifying regularity. He rushed up the staircase, already dreading what he'd find. The superhero-themed room of his twin boys, Mason and Carter, was a mess. Both 5-year-olds were crammed under a small desk, clinging to each other, faces streaked with sweat and tears. "Dad, she's back," Mason sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at the curtained window. "She wants to take us like she took Mom," Carter whispered, so scared he could barely speak. Patrick crouched down, desperate to pull them into his arms, but the boys only flinched away, eyes wide with terror. "You're safe. I'm here," he murmured, though his own voice was raw and hollow. How could he promise safety when every night he failed them? He tried everything: warm, milk-glowing nightlights, marathon story sessions, even sleeping on the floor next to their beds. Nothing worked. The twins only found restless sleep at dawn, waking up irritable and exhausted, shadows under their eyes growing deeper every day. Patrick would stumble downstairs, haunted by memories: Allison laughing over pancakes, the boys' bright voices filling the kitchen, all of it gone. His desperation drove him to extremes. He'd already burned through 4 nannies in as many months. Mrs. Edna Brown, the latest and experienced silver-haired woman with a resume full of wealthy families, called it quits after 2 weeks, defeated by nightmares she couldn't chase away. He tried doctors, therapists, even a sleep specialist from Harvard, but all he got were shrugs and talk of trauma. As a last-ditch effort, he paid a team of paranormal investigators to scour the house. He watched them set up thermal cameras and ghost-hunting gadgets, secretly hoping they'd find something, anything that could explain the terror ruling his sons' lives. But the experts found nothing but the chill of grief and memory. At work, Patrick was a legend, a self-made builder of skyscrapers bold enough to outwit Fortune 500 rivals. But at home, every accomplishment meant nothing against the fear in his son's eyes. He was drowning, losing his boys inch by inch to something he could neither fight nor understand. Then came the call from the school. The principal's voice was grave. "Mr. Hayes, you need to come pick up Mason and Carter." They fell asleep in class, and when a teacher tried to wake them, Mason started screaming about a shadow in the corner. Patrick left a room full of investors waiting and raced to the school, only to find his twins curled up in the nurse's office, pale and shivering in their sleep. On the drive home, Carter asked, "Dad, did Mom die because she was sleeping?" Mason added, "Is that why we can't sleep, so we won't die too?" Patrick had to pull over, hands shaking, as the boy's logic hit him like a punch. He tried to explain, tried to say Allison was sick, that sleeping wasn't dangerous. But they didn't believe him. "If we sleep, the shadow lady comes," Carter insisted, voice flat and certain. That night, Patrick made a desperate decision. He moved the boys' beds into the living room, slept between them on the couch, left every light in the house blazing, and even hired a security guard to sit by the door. The twins slept 4 hours for the first time in months, but woke screaming again, pointing at the shadow creeping down the stairs. Patrick began to wonder if something was truly haunting the house, or if the only ghosts were the ones inside their hearts. As the days blurred into sleepless weeks, Patrick's hope dwindled. 3 different agencies sent him candidates for the impossible job of nanny. Each one came with glowing credentials: Dr. Valerie Stone, a sleep scientist; Ms. Lisa Barrett, a grief counselor with a bag of therapy toys; another who'd worked with traumatized children from all over New England. None made it past the first interview. Mason and Carter hid from their questions and cried harder than ever. The house felt emptier with each failure, and Patrick began to wonder if he was doomed to live in the ruins of his old life forever. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. If you were Patrick, would you keep searching for help, or would you just give up? Have you ever faced a problem you thought had no solution? What would you do if your child was haunted by something you couldn't see or understand? Let me know in the comments. How do you think Patrick's story will change? The wind outside had shifted, rattling the windows of the Hayes mansion as if the whole world was restless. Patrick sat awake at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee until it went cold. All his power, all his resources, and yet he was powerless here, outmatched by 2 little boys' invisible terror. He was starting to believe their fear could devour them all. Then on a rain-soaked Thursday, Grace Foster arrived. She didn't look like any of the other nannies. She wore faded jeans, an oversized green cardigan, and old sneakers that squeaked on the marble floor. She carried a battered canvas bag with a rainbow of buttons sewn on, and her wild chestnut hair was caught in a lopsided braid. She was an hour late, apologized breathlessly, and smiled like she'd known the world's sorrows and survived them all. Patrick had almost sent her away, but Mason, hiding behind the banister, watched her curiously, and Carter peeked out from under the dining table. Grace crouched to their level, her eyes bright, her voice gentle. "I heard you 2 are dragon experts. I brought something just for you." She opened her bag and pulled out 2 hand-carved wooden dragons, paint-chipped, but still sparkling. "Guardians," she whispered, "for heroes who battle bad dreams." Mason and Carter, who had shrunk from every adult in months, took the dragons with trembling hands. Patrick was stunned. His boys looked at Grace not with fear, but with something like hope. Over the next hour, Grace didn't ask about nightmares or mothers or grief. She told stories about brave twins who outwitted monsters and built castles out of courage. She listened, really listened, when the boys confessed their fears of the Shadow Lady. She nodded as if she believed every word. "Of course she comes," Grace said softly. "But did you know shadows are afraid of dragon fire?" The boy's eyes widened, caught between disbelief and longing. Patrick watched the transformation begin that very first afternoon. When Grace was about to leave, Mason ran after her and blurted out, "Will you come back tomorrow?" Carter clutched his dragon tightly, nodding. Grace's answer was simple. "If your dad says yes, I'll be here." There are a lot more dragon stories to tell. For the first time in months, Patrick felt a sliver of hope. He hired Grace on the spot. That night, Grace created a new bedtime ritual. She let the boys arrange the dragons around their beds and explained that every dragon protected a different part of the night. One guarded against bad dreams, one kept the house safe, one watched over their hearts. She filled the room with soft golden lamps instead of harsh nightlights, hung wind chimes at the window, and scattered smooth-colored stones on the nightstand. She asked, "What was the best thing that happened today?" Mason whispered. "Dragons," Carter added. "You stayed." With Grace around, even Patrick found himself drawn into the boy's new bedtime world. He lay on the rug listening to Grace's voice spin magic out of thin air. The boys' eyes fluttered closed, the lines in their faces relaxing. It was almost midnight before the first cries came. Mason called for Grace, not Patrick. She knelt beside him, whispering a new story about a dragon whose only power was listening until a frightened child could sleep again. The twins slept 4 hours that night, then 5 the next night. By the end of the week, they were giggling over breakfast pancakes, asking Grace to stay all day. Patrick could hardly believe it. The house, once thick with despair, now felt alive again, if only at the edges. But not everyone was happy with the change. Mrs. Helen Grant, Patrick's loyal assistant, pulled him aside. "Are you sure about this woman? She's not typical?" Patrick looked at his sons, actually smiling, and said nothing. He was learning that sometimes you needed the opposite of typical. Grace's magic wasn't all fairy tales. One evening, she gently asked the boys, "What would make you feel safest tonight?" Carter said, "if you and Dad were both here." Grace looked at Patrick, who hesitated, then nodded. That night, all four of them sat on the living room floor, drawing dragons and taping them to the windows to block out the shadow lady. But darkness had not given up its grip. A week after Grace's arrival, as Patrick was tucking the boys in a power outage, swept through Wellesley Hills. The entire house plunged into darkness. The twins panicked. Mason screamed. Carter hid under the bed sobbing. Patrick's own chest tightened with helplessness. Grace moved swiftly, her calm steadying the chaos. She found the boys, held them close, and whispered, "Shadows are just lonely. Sometimes they need to be invited into the light." She handed each boy a tiny LED lantern from her bag and sat with them, breathing slowly until their terror faded into curiosity. "See," she said, switching the lanterns on. "You can make your own light." That night, for the first time since Allison died, both boys fell asleep before midnight and did not wake until morning. Patrick was floored. In the hush before dawn, as Grace packed away her dragons and stones, he asked, "How do you do it?" None of the doctors, none of the nannies could reach them. "But you," his voice faltered, afraid to believe in the miracle. Grace only smiled. "I listen, Mr. Hayes. That's the magic. I listen until I hear the story under the story, the one that's too scared to speak." As the sun rose over the quiet streets of Wellesley Hills, Patrick realized his heart was changing too. For the first time in months, he dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, the shadows could be defeated, not with science or money, but with understanding and patience, and the gentle fire of love. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. Do you think Grace's way is really magic, or is there something else she's hiding? Would you trust a stranger with your children if nothing else worked? Why do you think the boys trust Grace when they couldn't trust anyone else forgotten were possible? Grace Foster became more than a nanny. She became the quiet center of the family's new life. The gentle warmth that filled the spaces where Allison's absence had once left only cold shadows. The twins thrived. Mason and Carter went from wary, sleepless boys to bright-eyed, laughing children who dashed through the halls, invented elaborate games with their dragons, and sometimes even left drawings for Grace under her door, pictures of all four of them together smiling. Patrick's transformation was quieter but no less profound. He found himself coming home early just to be around Grace, to witness the casual magic with which she made pancakes taste like safety, or transformed an ordinary Tuesday evening into a celebration of silly hats and whispered bedtime secrets. There was a tenderness in the way she listened to the boys, the care with which she never pushed too hard or made them confront pain before they were ready. He realized in moments stolen between dinner and dusk that he was falling for her. It was a gentler kind of love than he'd felt for Allison, a love with room for the past and for the possibility of healing. But as winter melted into spring, Patrick hesitated. Could he risk changing the fragile peace Grace had built for his family? Was it possible to love again without betraying the memory of the woman he'd once sworn to cherish forever? Sometimes he'd catch Grace watching him, as if she too was waiting for permission to dream. One night after the twins had fallen asleep under their dragon guardians, and the house was lit with the golden hush of late evening, Patrick found Grace in the kitchen. She was drying the last dish, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, humming a song he didn't know. For a long time, he simply stood there, afraid to disturb the fragile, perfect moment. "Grace," he said quietly, "how did you know what the boys needed? How did you know what I needed?" She looked at him, her gaze soft but unflinching. "I didn't, but I listened." Sometimes love isn't about fixing things. It's about sitting in the dark with someone until they're ready for the light again. The words caught Patrick off guard, unraveling something inside him. He stepped closer. "What about you? Do you ever get tired of being the light?" She smiled, tired but true. "Everyone gets tired, Patrick. That's why we need each other. Even heroes need a place to rest." In that quiet space, Patrick let himself grieve for Allison, for the months lost, to fear for the man he'd been. And in the soft hush that followed, he reached for Grace's hand. "I don't know where this leads," he admitted, "but I don't want to lose you. Not now. Not ever." Grace's answer was a nod, a single tear, and then a laugh that felt like spring breaking through the last of winter. As their relationship deepened, they made every effort to honor Allison's memory. On the anniversary of her passing, Grace led the twins in creating a memory box, filling it with drawings, letters, and treasures that reminded them of their mom. They kept Allison's favorite flower in the kitchen and sometimes made her favorite lemon cookies, telling stories about her, so the boys would always remember that love could be both forever and change shape. For the first time, Mason and Carter began to talk about their mother not as a ghost who might return, but as a loving presence who watched over them from wherever dreams are born. They started sleeping through the night, waking up smiling. The shadows that had once ruled the house faded, replaced by warmth, laughter, and the quiet joy of a family growing new roots. That summer, Patrick took a leap he never imagined. On a breezy evening on Nantucket Island, with the waves crashing in the distance and the twins building sandcastles at their feet, Patrick knelt in the sand and asked Grace to become his wife and the boys' official mom. Mason and Carter whooped with joy, pelting them with seashells in celebration. Grace said yes through happy tears. The wedding was small, just the four of them, a handful of close friends, and a seat set aside with Allison's favorite scarf and a garden rose. Grace and Patrick exchanged vows that promised not only love, but gratitude for all the hearts that had helped them find their way back to each other. Afterward, as the sun set over the Atlantic and the air filled with the laughter of children, Grace whispered to Patrick, "You didn't just save your boys, you saved me too." In the years that followed, the Hayes family became living proof that love is not a finite resource. Their home was sometimes messy, often loud, but always full of kindness. Grace taught the twins how to bake bread, how to plant wildflowers, and when they asked about Allison, how to remember someone with joy instead of fear. Patrick changed too. He brought his new wisdom into the business world, launching a foundation for families dealing with loss, supporting grief counselors in schools, and offering flexible schedules to employees who needed to be home with their children. He told anyone who'd listen that the true foundation of his fortune was built not on buildings but on second chances and the courage to begin again. Some evenings when the house was quiet and the twins asleep, Patrick and Grace would sit together, remembering the long road that brought them here. The fear, the sleepless nights, the first spark of hope. They understood more than most that sometimes families are rebuilt from the ashes of heartbreak, and that sometimes the person who saves you is the last one you expect. They never stopped honoring Allison's place in their story, but their home became a living testament to healing love and new beginnings. Mason and Carter grew up with two mothers to guide them, one in memory and one by their side. And on those rare nights when shadows crept along the walls, Grace would light a candle and tell the boys, "You're never alone. Your family is bigger than fear." Their story, once marked by darkness, was now a beacon, an invitation for others to believe that hope, like love, can find you when you least expect it. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. What part of this story touched you most? Do you believe in second chances for families after tragedy? If you felt moved, comment under below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you think someone needs this message of hope, please share this story with them.